Swear that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Raise your right hand, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. You may be seated. Yes, Mr. Monahel.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Mr. Rapudi, you have made a statement for purposes of your presentation or giving evidence at this commission. I ask you to start reading your statement at paragraph 1.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioner and the members. My name is Tsepo Bernard Rapudi. I'm an adult male. I'm employed by the Public Investment Corporation from the 15th of March 2010 to date. I'm currently an investment fund. I'm currently an associate fund principal within the Impact Investing Division. I report to the fund principal of the relevant investment portfolio. I have a Bachelor of Commerce degree, postgraduate diploma in Advanced Accounting Sciences, postgraduate diploma in Applied Accounting Sciences, which is called CTA, and certificate in Advanced Company Law. I am a chartered accountant. I confirm that to the best of my knowledge and recollection, the contents contained in this statement are true and accurate. I have been requested by the evidence team of this commission to submit a statement which details my role and understanding of facts relating to PIC's investment in Kilimanjaro Sakumnot Consortium, Pty Ltd, referred to Kisako. I confirm that this statement is entirely my version of events. I have not been instructed by any member of the Commission's team to make any changes to this statement. Commissioner, I will now deal with the role I played within this transaction. I must indicate, Commissioner, that at the time this transaction was happening, I was an investment associate, not an associate fund principal. In this transaction, I led the team which conducted the appraisal of the transaction pursuant to an application for finance by Kilimanjaro Capital, Pty Ltd, herein referred to as KiliCap, which was represented by Mr. Lawrence Shumani Mulauzi. I was involved in the structuring and negotiations of the transaction up to financial close, from origination to financial close. The team which worked on these transactions include a team comprising of 2 investment analysts, being Ms. Bridget Lelo and Mr. James Mchenga, PIC legal team represented by Ms. Lindiwe Dlamini, PIC credit risk team led by Mr. Itumeleng Migwa, and external legal teams. Through you, Commissioner, what I will deal with now is I shall now deal with how the transaction was processed from the time we received the application until implementation.
Okay, can I ask you this question? When you refer to the processing of the transaction, are you referring to the processing of the KiliCap transaction or any other transaction?
I think as I provide the statement through you, Commissioner, you'll see the transaction will change from the borrower being KiliCap to the borrower becoming Kisako. And as I proceed, I will be able to provide the context in terms of how that change occurred. The transaction was assigned to me on the 29th of May 2015 when Mr. Rohit Rajda, the executive head of Impact Investing, asked me to join.
Sorry, are you able to give us an indication as to how the transaction got into the door of the PIC?
Through you, Mr. Commissioner, I think I became aware of this transaction on the 29th of May 2015. But if you go through the emails, you'll see the transaction, I think, came to PIC on the 22nd of May. So I've got a covering letter which I've attached as Annexure A, Commissioner, which shows a letter that was written by Kilimanjaro Capital, addressed to the then CEO, Dr. Daniel Machila, on the 22nd of May.
So one can then assume that it came through Dr. Machila? That's where it started.
One can assume that it came through the office of the CEO, yes, Commissioner, as this letter, I think, was sent to the office of the CEO.
No, I'm just impressed by you saying that it came through the office of the CEO rather than the CEO himself that I mentioned.
So I will go back to paragraph 9 through Commissioner. Mr. Rohit Rajda, the executive head, asked me to join him in a meeting with KiliCap's representative, Mr. Mlauzi. Mr. Mlauzi in that meeting introduced the transaction which involved the acquisition of 91.8% equity interest in Total South Africa Consortium, Pty Ltd, herein referred to as TOSACO, and 100% equity interest in TOSACO Retail. In the same meeting, Mr. Mlauzi highlighted to us that the transaction had tight deadlines, and we explained to Mr. Mlauzi's investment processes of the PIC and explained that the turnaround time will depend on whether KiliCap could obtain the exclusivity and the quality and availability of the information provided to us. We'll be able to align ourselves within the deadlines. After some deliberation within that meeting, Mr. Mlauzi agreed that he will send us all the information via the email to enable us to start working on the transaction.
If I may intervene there, you say that you explained to Mr. Mlauzi, or you explained to Mr. Mlauzi that PIC's investment processes. What did you tell him about the investment process?
I mean, this is the process on which it starts from doing the scoping report. After we've prepared that scoping report, we will go engage in the DD, and during that DD, we'll be sending an information required list, which if they can be able to provide us that information on time, we'll be able to perform our due diligence. And during the same due diligence process, the team is to prepare the appraisal report, which at that time will include other assurance teams like your legal, your risk, to make sure that we go to PMC2. And for us to be able to do that, we need information as per various information request list. From there, we will be, after if we went to PMC2 and they have recommended to the FIP, we'll be going to the FIP, or we go to IC. That is the process which we explained to him.
Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you. On the same day, Commissioner, the 29th of May 2015, I received an email from Mr. Mlauzi containing the following documents, being the teaser document. We had an information memorandum, KiliCap investment presentation, KiliCap covering letter, and Total SAPWC December 2014 draft valuation report. I have annexed the covering letter which came up with this information for your attention, Commissioner. Okay. Mr. Mlauzi advised me that in order for KiliCap to secure the exclusivity which we needed on paragraph 10, he required a non-binding expression of interest from the PIC, so that he can be able to put a non-binding offer to the TOSACO shareholders. On the 2nd of June 2015, the PIC provided a non-binding expression of interest letter addressed to the directors of TOSACO in support of KiliCap's bid. I have provided Annexure B of this particular expression of interest letter, Commissioner. Following the issuance of this expression of interest letter, the shareholders of Tosako informed Kilcap that they will not provide exclusivity because they had appointed Nedbank to run a competitive bidding process for the disposal of their shareholding in Tosako. Furthermore, they advised Kilcap to participate in this or in the bidding process. This response letter, Commissioner, I've attached it as Annexure C. The team completed a scoping report which was presented to PMC1 on the 29th of June 2015. The committee approved the proposal for the team to proceed to the due diligence phase, which I've attached the extract of that minutes, Commissioner. The PIC and Kilcap signed an engagement letter on the 30th of June 2015, which I've attached here as Annexure E. Thereafter, PIC was given access to the data room in order to conduct its due diligence and valuation. On the 24th of July 2015, the teams from the Impact Investing, Legal and Risk Division presented their respective reports to PMC2, requesting the committee to recommend to the transaction to the priority sector, small medium enterprise fund investment panel, here in which I'll be referring to it as PSSME FIP for approval. After consideration of the transaction, the committee resolved to recommend the transaction to be submitted to the PSSME FIP for approval. These reports were duly submitted on the 27th of July 2015. I've also attached Annexure F, Commissioner, for your reference, which is the extract of the minutes of this particular PMC 2.
Question, why was this in the PSSME area? You know, was it because it's priority or small enterprises? Or?
If you look at the rationale for the transaction where we did it within the impact investing through you, Commissioner, was that one of the elements of this transaction was not just to do a BEE deal, was to fund the rollout of the franchising within the Total SA branded. Okay.
The SME part was?
Yes, the SME part was one of the reasons why we went to this FIP.
All right.
Sorry, before you continue, can I just take you back to paragraph 14? And unless I'm misunderstanding it, if you look at Annexure D 11.2, it was noted that an exclusivity agreement had already been signed with Nedbank being the financial advisor. I thought there was no exclusivity.
I think at this committee, we understood that Tosako was considering the exclusivity, which later on it came to our attention that they are not entertaining the exclusivity part. When we went to scoping, we've always went on the basis that we might be able to get the exclusivity.
Yes, but the minute doesn't say that. The minute is, it was noted that an exclusivity agreement had already been signed with Nedbank being the financial advisor. And from what I understand from the document, it was a question that the counterparty had said they're not signing an exclusivity because they'd given Nedbank a mandate to look for proposals. So this is actually, it doesn't necessarily affect your testimony because your testimony is clear, but the minute says something different, and I'm just drawing it to your attention.
I've noted that through you, Commissioner, and the understanding at the time we were preparing the scoping report was that Kilcap is pursuing Tosako shareholders to provide them with exclusivity.
But when you got to the meeting, you must have known then that there was an exclusivity agreement had already been signed with Nedbank, because otherwise it wouldn't be in the minute. I'm saying, it's not a criticism, once again, it's not a criticism. All I'm saying is that by the time you got to the meeting
Yes,
from which this minute comes,
yes.
then you must have known then that there had been an exclusivity signed with Nedbank.
So the exclusivity, what happened is we got to know later on that there's no exclusivity. But during the time when the team was was engaging with KILICAP, working on the scoping report, we've always worked on the understanding that exclusivity will be there, and to find that there is no exclusivity, Commissioner.
I think we're in agreement there.
Yes.
All I'm saying is that by the time you got to the meeting,
Yes.
or it was announced at the meeting, or it was discovered at the meeting that they had been with Nedbank.
It was discovered after the meeting, I think, that Nedbank has got, has got a mandate to do the bidding process.
Not that it really matters. I think you can go ahead.
Yes. Commissioner, on the 27th of July 2015, the deal team received a letter addressed to KILICAP from Nedbank confirming that KILICAP has been shortlisted to phase 2 and they are expected to submit their final binding offer on the 7th of August 2015. And this offer should be accompanied by unconditional funding support letter or term sheet. I have made reference, I've annexed this letter as Annexure G for your attention, Commissioner. On the 28th of July 2015, the then former CEO of the PIC, Dr. Dan Majila, and Mr. Ernest Nesani, former executive head of legal, informed me that other bidders selected to participate in phase 2 of the bidding process approached PIC for funding. And given this situation, I was informed to withdraw the investment proposal from the agenda, and this investment proposal relates to the KILICAP, from the agenda of the meeting of the PSSME, which was scheduled to be for the 31st of July 2015.
If I may intervene there, did they tell you who these other bidders were?
In this meeting, through you, Commissioner, I was not informed which other bidders were, but the message was that we can't proceed and get the approval of one bidder while there are other bidders which are bidding for the same asset. On the following day, being the 29th of July 2015, Mr. Benedict Mungalo, an investment associate at that time, sent me 2 letters of support issued by PIC dated 30 June 2015. These letters of support were addressed to one to Sakumunoto Group, and the other one was addressed to Lireko Consortium, respectively. I've annexed these 2 letters as Annexure H for your reference, Commissioner. The following day, being the 30th of July 2015, I received 2 separate emails from Mr. Mlauzi. Actually, these emails were being forwarded to me, and these emails contained 2 separate letters addressed to PIC and the other one addressed to Nedbank, informing them about the merger of KILICAP and Sakumunoto Group. These letters were co-signed by both Mr. Sipho Mselegu as the representative of Sakumunoto and Mr. Mlauzi of KILICAP, and they've signed these letters as the joint chairman of the merged consortium. I've annexed Annexure A for this merger letter.
Sorry, just in your annexures, one of the annexures is to Lireko, who also seems to have been interested in the deal. Were they left out altogether? Or how did you come to a partnership between, or how did the partnership arrive on the PIC's part between Kilimanjaro and Sakumunoto, and what happened to the Lireko interest? Was that withdrawn by Lireko, or what happened?
Through you, Commissioner, The only time that I knew about the Lireko was when the letter was sent to me. What happened to their application, I do not know, Commissioner.
Okay.
Thank you. On paragraph 21, Commissioner, the above notification of the merger between Kilikep and Sakumnoto meant that there is now a new borrower in a form of Kisako, not Kilikep, in the transaction. On the 31st of July 2015, I requested an information on Sakumnoto Group for validation and to be used to update the appraisal report, which shall be resubmitted to the PSSME FIP.
May I intervene there? Had any due diligence been done on Sakumnoto or not?
Through you, Commissioner, all what we did on Sakumnoto, Commissioner, is that we had performed the know your client, what you call, for our FICA purposes, so that we can know the shareholders of the new entity being called Kisako.
But no due diligence.
No diligence was performed on Sakumnoto as a group, but we did a FICA assessment on
Okay.
them.
Because the question arose in the previous presentation, if I recall correctly, colleagues, was that there was a fee paid for due diligence that was split equally between Kilimanjaro and Sakumnoto.
Yes.
One for work done and one for ostensible work done. So are we saying that there was no due diligence done on Sakumnoto, and therefore that money, if I remember, it was 50 or 60 million rand each? One was real at around 38 for the transaction and other legal fees. It was 50 million rand each, if I remember.
I will get to that part when I get to paragraph 31 through you, Commissioner.
Just to follow up on the Lireko, yeah, Lireko and Sakumnoto. When this was happening and you didn't know about this, was it being done somewhere else within the PIC? Is that normal, that you could be doing one sponsor, others could be doing other sponsors for the same transaction?
Commissioner, I think the question of whether this is normal, it depends on the process which the ultimate sellers they're following. So if ever the seller, let's assume, will provide, they're saying people should bid, and after they're bidding, they will be provided enough time to perform a due diligence. We can be in a situation where two different teams are looking at various sponsors, because at that time they're looking to get exclusivity before they can get the funding. But in case of this one, you are sitting with a situation where you need to run the process, because when you provide the final bidding, you also need to provide the letter of funding at that time. So I will say the sequence of events will make it normal, because the other process will be going, and while the other one, so it will not make sense or normal.
So to you, this didn't make sense of having parallel horses in the same race?
More especially that at the end of the process, all of them, they must provide the funding support letter. So you'll see a situation where you provided a non-binding, then you are required, when they provide their final binding offer, they must have a funding support letter. So it will not make sense, Commissioner.
Okay, if I may ask, at paragraph 16 of your statement, the last, or the sentence before the last one, you said, after consideration of the transaction, the committee resolved to recommend the transaction to be submitted to the PSSME FIP for approval, and you were referring to PMC 2. Did you go to PMC 2 after the companies merged?
Through you, Commissioner, we We did not go to the PMC2 after the companies merged.
Okay. Is there any specific reason why you did not go to PMC2?
I think at the time when we were on the 31st of July, when this came to our attention, we were left with almost 3-4 days before the 7th of August 2015. And as the team, while we were involved in that, and which we were made aware that there is a new consortium, there's a new consortium that has merged with at that time, a consortium that we've already been working on. So the team at that time felt that the fundamentals of the transaction being the outcome of the DD, except the other borrower being the Sacumnot, does not necessarily change. As such, what we did, when we went to the next committee, we did inform the next committee, being the FIP, that we're bringing this transaction to their attention, and note that there is this merger between Sacumnoto and Kilimanjaro.
But don't you think that it was necessary maybe for you to go back to PMC2? Because when PMC2 recommended the transaction to FIP, it knew that the sponsor was Kilicap. It didn't know about the merged entity.
I agree, we should have gone to the PMC too.
You may proceed.
Thank you. On paragraph 22, Mr. Mungalo coordinated a meeting between the PIC and the members of Kisako. The meeting was held on the 3rd of August 2015 at the PIC offices for the following purposes. 1, the introduction of the merged consortium to the PIC deal team. 2, update by the consortium of its bid, submission, and key salient features of the consortium's merger. 3, communication of the PIC approval process henceforth. On the 6th of August 2015, PIC sent a funding undertaking letter of support addressed to Nedbank prior to Kisako submitting its final bid on the 7th of August 2015. Paragraph 6 of that letter stated that, I quote, "We confirm that should the consortium be selected as the winning bidder, the PIC hereby confirms its interest and commitment to provide in aggregate up to 1.7 billion in funding to the consortium to satisfy its total purchase consideration for the proposed transaction," which I'm attaching as Annexure J, the letter of funding support. The above confirmation by the PIC Commissioner was subject and conditional on the approval of Kisako as the preferred bidder and final approval of the transaction by the PIC relevant committee. On the 12th of August 2015, the teams from Impact Investing, Legal and Risk Division presented their respective reports to a PSSME FIP for approval. At this meeting, the committee considered the transaction and resolved to recommend the transaction to the investment committee for final approval, which I'm attaching the minutes of that PSSME FIP as Annexure K for your attention, Commissioner. On the 14th of August 2015, the investment recommendation was presented to the investment committee for approval. At this meeting, the committee considered and approved the transaction, which I'm attaching Annexure L1, 2, and 3, which contain the minutes, the resolution, and the document that was submitted.
Mr. Commissioner, may I just bring it to the attention of the Commission that Annexure L2 does not form part of the annexures to the statement because of the size thereof, but we have provided it in soft copy to the Secretariat.
Thank you.
On the same day, being the 14th of August 2015, Commissioner, the Nedbank confirmed via an email that Kisako has been selected as the preferred bidder. And a letter confirming this was received on the 18th of August 2015. It means at this time, Commissioner, the borrower now is being selected as the preferred bidder, and PIC has also approved the funding.
And what was the quantum of the funding?
The quantum of the funding that was approved at this committee through you, Commissioner, the PIC approved 2.1 billion, of which 1.7 billion was to deal with the acquisition of the shares, the Tosako shares. 300 million was to deal with the Tosako retail expansion, and the 100 million was to deal with the transaction-related cost.
So given that there hasn't been rollout, I'm assuming that the 300 million has not been drawn down and it would have to be reapplied for?
The 300 million has not been, the timeline for it has expired, and we'll need to go back to committees if ever we have to finalize it.
Yeah, but it was never granted, it was never paid out.
It was never paid out, yes.
So it's a reapplication should that be required.
Correct,
And the
Commissioner.
100 million was for the legal fees between the two.
Yes, so the only amount that was dispersed is 1.8 billion.
Where does 1.7 come from?
The 1.7 billion is the final bidding offer that Kisako Consortium made to the Tosako shareholders.
The bid was, the bid for the deal was 1.7 and 100 million was given to
The borrower for its
the borrowers, the
to transaction.
two elements, 50 million each for doing the transaction.
Correct, Commissioner.
And did you validate that those were actual expenses?
Come again, Commissioner?
Were those actual expenses incurred by each party to the bid? 50 million, was it actually expended? I mean, were there legal fees, whatever the fees were, advisor fees? Did you actually validate that that 50 million was required and that the work had been done?
To my understanding and recollection at that time, yes, the cost was incurred, because when you look in terms of when we were finalizing the transaction, you'll realize we had, for example, 5 legal teams, one representing Kilikep, one representing Sakumnoto, not 5, 4 legal teams, and PIC had a twinning legal teams, which was made up of Bowman and another entity called Chivas Incorporation.
Yeah,
So-
but your legal teams are part of your own costs. You don't pay that out as part of the deal.
So what we did in this transaction was that we made the borrower pick up PIC's cost as part of their loan application. Yes. Continuing from paragraph 8, Commissioner, the internal PIC legal team was responsible for the drafting and negotiations of the legal agreements with the assistance of two external legal firms, namely Bowman Gilef and Chivas Incorporated. All the conditions precedents which were part of these agreements were met and signed off by the PIC legal team as part of the disbursement file sign-off process, which I've made the checklist to your attention, which was signed off. Following the project handover meeting on the 27th of November 2015, the disbursement was made on the 9th of December 2015, which I've provided the proof of payment thereof, Commissioner. What I just want to add there is that the 1.7 billion was paid to the Main Street, being the ultimate company in which the Kisako will be a shareholder, and the 100 million was paid to Kisako, the entity being the borrower in this case. Through you, Commissioner, now I'll want to deal with the transaction cost, how we were dealt with. The loan amount of 2.1 billion was approved, comprising of 1.7 billion relating to the acquisition of the shares, 300 million relating to the rollout of the 20 retail stations, retail service station sites, and the 100 million to fund the consortium transaction related cost. Commissioner, essentially there were two loans, one of 1.7 billion related to the purchase of shares and the 100 million for this transaction cost. As I've indicated, the funding for the rollout of service station have not been dispersed. On the paragraph 33, to date, we'll just want to put it on record that Kisako has paid back the 258 million to PIC. In terms of the application of funds, Commissioner, it is first allocated to the cost and taxes, interest, and the principal debt. Therefore, the loan of the 100 million has been fully repaid, with the balance of the funds having been applied towards the reduction of the interest accrual. On paragraph 34, Commissioner, we just want to provide that Kisako is up to date with its obligation in terms of the agreement concluded with PIC. Kisako has not yet implemented the retail service station of the approval. This approval has expired and it will have to make a fresh application to the PIC. In terms of the target being the TSA, the company has performed well, has performed in line with the base case projection when the application was considered.
Can I ask you on the 100 million rand? Were you, Mr. Mulaitu testified before this commission that they had entered into an agreement with BNP Capital, if I remember correctly, that they will pay 2% plus VAT. Did they provide you with any document to that effect?
Thank you. Through you, Commissioner, what we know is that just after we went to the scoping, we were introduced to the BNP Capital, that they will be working with us, and I think throughout the transaction, due diligence and so forth, we were liaising with BNP Capital and other service providers which were appointed by KiliCap. And we were also being made aware of the fact that they've got a risk-based advisory fee or mandate, which was for 2%.
I believe that one would expect that mandate to be in writing. Did they provide you with the mandate in writing, or did you just rely on their say-so?
They confirmed to us via email that they have appointed BNP Capital to be their advisors, and unfortunately we did not request the mandate in writing.
Then what about Sakumnoto?
So, on the Sakumnoto point of view, Commissioner, the time when they were introduced to us, you realize that at that time, the DD process for both the PIC or the potential bidders has already been completed. So we didn't really deal a lot with the advisors from Sakumnoto, but we were made aware that during the DD process for their bidding process being Sakumnoto, they also have got similar arrangements that KiliCap has got of advisors.
So they did they not provide you with any document to setting out what the agreement or arrangement between them was?
I met their advisor once on the meeting that I referred to on the 3rd of August. And there was no any other further information that was provided to me or to the team regarding the arrangement with their advisors.
Okay, where did you get the figure of 100 million rand from, or the 50 million each?
Through you, Commissioner, so you realize at the time when the the two companies are merging. We have been negotiating with KiloCap, and we understand the cost structures that they have. And here enters the other company being Sakumno, to which really they should have, for the sake of the due diligence or for their bidding, they will have gone through the same process. And we are made to understand that they also have got that. So therefore, what you will have done, mathematically, you will have said, okay, this side, if you say you have agreed on the 50 million and there's a new entrance and that says they've gone through the same process, therefore you'll make the 50 million, you'll add the 250 millions, you arrive at 100 million.
But based on Mr. Mulauzi's evidence, they could not have agreed on 50 million. What he testified to was that they agreed with BNP Capital that they would pay them 2% of the transaction fee or the acquisition fee,
Yes.
plus 2%, if I remember correctly. And he said that that amount was 38 million rand. Then what about the 12 million rand?
Okay. So if you check, he probably referred to one mandate, which is the risk-based mandate, and he didn't mention the, if I'm not mistaken, he would have mentioned that you would have had the legal cost, which I've already indicated that as part of that 100 million, the PIC, the legal team, was paid out of that 100 million. You would have paid, your competition commission filing. But further to this, to bring to the attention of the commission is that at that time when we were doing this, the understanding was that you're going to have Tosako Retail to be operational. So beyond this approval, you'll want the Kisako to have a main cost structure that will implement the Tosako Retail, because the 300 million was more to go towards the rollout. But the feasibility studies to set up the back office and so forth will have required part of the funding to go, part of the transaction cost to go towards that part of the Tosako Retail implementation.
Do you know when these companies approached the competition tribunal to approve the merger?
I think we would have gone to the competition tribunal around, because we had various competition tribunal approval, because TSA has got operations in other countries. So we'll have received the last competition commission approval around end of November, which I think was coming from Namibia also. But the South African one, we would have received it much earlier, because the Tosako, the sellers were already ahead, in terms of the filing.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. If I may indicate why I asked the last question, I was asking it because the two companies had merged. My concern was, would each of them have needed to appoint its own law firm for purposes of applying to the competition tribunal for approval of the merger? If they only needed to appoint one law firm or two maybe, then it goes to the issue of the costs involved.
I think that just a couple of things, more points, and if you can answer. It's quite clear the way this was done that it added 100 million or a percentage of the 100 million to the costs, because you had a duality. But that is probably relatively small in relation to the implications of a merger being foisted on two parties at a late date. And in fact, what we've seen now, which we didn't see in the previous one, that in fact there was a third party that was interested in the same deal. So to me, really, the question that I would ask you is, how comfortable are you with concluding a transaction of this nature where incomplete governance and processes appear to be the case, given time pressures? Because that's one thing that's coming through frequently, is given the time, we didn't go to PMC2. Given the time requirements, we didn't do that. So does time become, the element of getting the deal through on time, more important than ensuring that the PIC considers the transaction in the processes that have been determined? And how comfortable are you knowing that you complete transactions without complete governance?
Through you, Commissioner, I think if you look at the process that the team that I led ran, Commissioner, you will realize that this team was not under time pressure. The team had all the time. I mean, the time when we received the application on the 29th of May, going to PMC1 on the 29th of June, going again to PMC2 on the 30th, on the 24th of July, targeting FIP on the 31st of July. Because if you see that FIP of the 31st of July, the team was saying, we want a situation where when Kilicap makes its final bid, we are sitting with a resolution.
I agree,
yes,
but that is not what happened.
Yes,
because there was an intervention that derailed a due process.
Yes, I was getting to that. So, because the question was how comfortable we were, you know. So we get to be informed about the other parties. And at the same time, you don't want a situation where when these guys, they do the final bidding, you don't have the approval. So at the beginning, you will realize that it was an element of saying there's a deal that the same consortiums might not win. Either Kilicap can go alone, doesn't win, or the consortium go together, they don't win, and the PIC doesn't take a risk. That is the first part, that the deal was more related in terms of what the decision of the TOSACO shareholders take in terms of who they sell to. The issue of not going back to PMC2, I think at that time the team, when we discussed that probably the best solution given what was before us was to go to the next committee and say, we've got this merged entity being called KISACO. However, we are not taking any risk on KISACO until they've got a certificate that says we are the preferred bidder. So that was the solution that the team thought at that time will be appropriate.
I accept what you're raising, but the question for me comes back to process. As a person advising on an investment, from what you've said today, I'm not confident that you did the same due diligence approach to Sakomnoto that you did with Kilimanjaro, with Kilicap. So therefore, it may have been done, and you accepted what was done, because it was something, certainly that's what you've indicated today, that you accepted that their due diligence, that the things had been done, and therefore it was on par, so that when they merged in that very short space of time, they were two parties who had not known each other. And therefore, I'm coming back to the question of process within the PIC. That's what I'm trying to get at, not to look at it and say, could you have done something different? I'm trying to look at process where you have multiple bidders for the same entity, or interested parties in the same entity coming to the PIC. How is that managed? And it may not be something you can answer, but it is something that indicates that there's a gap that comes so late in the day. I'm quite sure it's not a unique circumstance where you've got more than one interested party in a transaction. If the PIC is interested in a number of parties, what steps, what processes does it follow to determine which it would support or not support or ask to merge or whatever, and where does that lie? Because each of these parties should have come to a different committee or to a PMC1, a PMC2, where does this get picked up to say, hang on, we've got 2 or 3 coming on the same transaction? And therefore, what is the PIC process to make sure that it is as thorough and rigorous as possible in determining that? And that's what's missing for me in what you've outlined, is they've all should have gone to PMC 1. They should have gone to PMC 2. They should have had a letter from the CEO about whether we are doing this or that or the other. Somewhere there would have been a coordination, and therefore, or should have been a coordination to say, how many bidders do we have for project X or transaction Y? And that's what's concerning me about what you've presented today, is where is that dealt with in the PIC in a manner that creates or ensures the rigor that's required by the PIC? Sure, you can answer it, but I think it's an issue that's arisen out of your testimony.
I agree, Commissioner, and there should have been a proper coordination between the team that was aware about Sakumnot and other parties bidding, and bringing to the attention of the team that was running Kilikep. And I agree, I'm not the person to answer in terms of at what level do we create that coordination.
Just in terms of the 100 million rent fee, the last time we talked about here was people felt it was quite a lot of money for that transaction amount. What's your feeling about that, the 100 million on that transaction, the quantum?
Through you, Commissioner, I think at the time when we were doing the transaction, Commissioner, you'll realize the way we structured the transaction, it's first of all, the team was comfortable with the asset cover. So if you check in terms of the value of the shares that we bought at that time, one could have bought that stake for amount of 2 billion rand. And when we look in terms of the loan funding that we were providing to Kisako, so the team was comfortable in terms of the asset cover. And through the loan term, or the term of the loan, when we were doing the projections, we were coming up with a asset cover of average 1.57. The second thing to answer that question through you, Commissioner, is that when you look in terms of the performance of TSA when it comes to liquidity to the shareholders, TSA, it's one of those companies, for example, you look at the Tusako shareholders that were exiting, they bought their shares back in 2003 for roughly around 1.2 billion or 1.3 billion at that time. And at the time when they were exiting here, they've already fully paid their loan. So that gave us comfort that there is enough liquidity to be able to settle this additional loan to cover the transaction-related cost. In addition to that, when we were doing because we're closing this deal, I think Total SA end it's December, we were made aware that there will be dividends that are coming in the next 12 months, which this additional 100 million will be quickly be repaid. Hence, we are sitting within the 3-4 years, we are seeing almost 258 million rand being repaid.
Yeah, look, sort of granted, I can hear that, but I mean the fee was like 5.8%, like 6%.
I agreed, Commissioner, that in an ordinary course of business, if ever we did not have the two merged consortium or where a situation where you have to pay similar costs to both parties, we will not be arriving at that number. But we find ourselves in a situation where this fee, it has doubled because of what has transpired within the process. But what we're saying, it's even that doubling where the team was still comfortable with those 3 reasons that the PIC, we're not exposing the client into that. Maybe just also to add in our structure, one of the things which we had is that we have got what we call equity kicker in our loan funding. So our loan is also linked to, at maturity, the value of these shares. So you'll see a situation where we're getting a 30% equity kicker at the value of the shares at the exit or at maturity of this loan.
So it was a great transaction, from your side, from your point of view then.
This is one of those BE transactions in South Africa that if ever we can get, because most of these BE deals you find, the BEs are sitting in the deals where they've got debt, there's no liquidity. So in terms of this transaction, we are seeing transformation that you see economic benefits being transferred to the beneficiaries. Unlike where you are stuck with debt for a period of 10 years, hoping that the value of the shares that you bought in 10 years has increased. That's the first part that makes me say this is one of the B's. That if in South Africa we can get a number of them, I think we will be able to achieve transformation quickly. Secondly, the 300 million, because really the 300 million was going to unlock. We're going to create entrepreneurs because Tosako Retail was not going to operate these service stations. What they were just going to be, they were just going to be a property holding entity, leasing these service stations to the franchisees. So we're going to tap in terms of creating those entrepreneurs, minimum 20, but also the number of jobs within those each service station. I think we're assuming that at that time that 1,000 jobs will be created out of this retail platform.
And then the final question from me is that when Sakumnoto was hoisted into the transaction, was there shock at the PIC or it was just normal process, normal day and all that?
Shock at the PIC or the PIC?
Was the shock that why are you getting a new consortium when things are so advanced and all that?
The fact of the matter is none of the bidders has won the bidding of the shares. So at any time until the 14th of August, none of them will claim to say, I was the preferred bidder of this asset. The shock in a normal, ordinary course when something new that you're not expecting, it comes to your attention, I think people respond differently. And I think we'll have been shocked, but not to a shock of that we can't continue doing our job. We got shocked and we followed instruction that was there to conclude the transaction.
All right, yeah. Thanks from my side.
Mr. Commissioner, if there are no further questions, that will be the witness's evidence and that will be the business for the day.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Abudi, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the information that you've placed before us. It has thrown some light on other matters, although I wanted to ask a last question, but that's all right. I'll let it go. But thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'll then adjourn until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.